Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a high gain amp shootout between my Paul Reed Smith Archon 50 Mark II and my Marshall DSL 100 HR. So I've got two sound samples for you today. For riff 1, we're going to be playing in Dadgad in C. We're not going to be boosting. The Archon 50 is going to be having the bright switch on. For the DSL 100 HR, even though I'm not a fan of it, I am using OD2. We're also going to be using a fair amount of mids, so it's definitely not a scoop setting. And we are using my Gibson 1959 Les Paul standard. This does not have the Murphy Lab treatment to it, and also we're using a Marshall 1960 AHW cabinet. And for riff 2, we are in E standard. We are going to continue to have that bright switch on the Archon 50. We're going to be dialing back the mids here, so it's a somewhat scooped setting. And we're going to be traveling over to OD2 on the Marshall. We are also going to be using my Gibson 1968 Les Paul Custom. This is a Murphy Lab Ultra Light. And finally, for the cabinet, we're going to be using a Mesa 4x12 oversized slant cabinet. All right, so that's it for all of the playing here. I'm not going to be picking up another guitar for this video here. I wanted to do this shootout here for a few reasons. I wanted to keep things a little simple as well, so that's why you weren't seeing like, you know, the 8 different cabinets or like, you know, matching cabinet to the head kind of a thing. I tried to keep things a little on the neutral side for the sound that I was going for. I also didn't go too crazy on the settings. I didn't want to have like, you know, this dialed in for this and dialed in for that. I'm not that kind of guy. I like to kind of change my settings as I kind of, you know, come up with a riff or whatever. So it's just a sound that I liked for both. Also, the Archon 50 here, it is, and the DSL 100 HR, chances are, because of the budgets for these, they're going to be a typical first full-size amp. So an amp that's not a lunchbox size or like a 20 or 30 watt amp. So 50 watts, 100 watts. I think that it's beneficial to kind of see amps that are kind of classed in the same budget, I guess you would say. Even though it is always fun to just take 2 amps, put it up on the desk and go, here we go. What does this sound like versus what does this sound like? But you know, it is always important to take a look at, you know, what is in your projected budget range. As far as the Archon 50 and the DSL 100 HR, the Archon 50 is a very different amp EQ wise. So when it comes to the EQ on the Archon 50, the middle and the treble, those controls are very, very, very sensitive, and they can really change the overall tone. Like a lot of times, you know, if you want a lot more treble, like on the DSL 100, you just, not dime, but you know, you really turn up that treble and then start backing it off to where it's, you know, something that's acceptable. Here, if you just inch your, or not inch your treble, like if you move it like a millimeter, it's going to affect the overall sound. Same with the mids. The bass is like that as well, but I think it's more, you see more of that effect when you're taking it from like 9 o'clock, dialing it back to like 8 o'clock. It will really shift the overall tone. It's also an amp that for high gain, you're going to want that bright switch on. And you will want to have your treble skewed a little bit. Normally I wouldn't do that on an amp. I don't like bringing my treble settings past like 1 o'clock. And like even then, if I have my presence dialed back to usually about noon or 11 o'clock. This is not the case here for the Archon 50. It is one of those amps, because you kind of end up skewing some of your EQs where you normally wouldn't. It makes it that much more versatile in a 2-channel amp. The DSL 100 HR, it's an amp that I've had for years and years and years, and a lot of people have enjoyed when I play it. A lot more than I've enjoyed playing it. It's always one of those amps where, you know, I like to say that it's a fantastic amp because I think it is a fantastic amp, but it doesn't speak to me a lot. It's not one of those amps where I'm like, all right, I got to grab the DSL 100 HR. And I'm also someone who has a JCM 2000 DSL 50 and a JCM 2000 TSL 100. I would much rather play with those. I find they're a little more versatile than the DSL 100 HR, but that, to me, a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is digital reverb, those are spring reverbs, and for the DSL 100 HR, there's one change that they made that, depending on who you are as a player and how you like to dial things in, they took out the deep switch and changed to a resonance control. And the difference here is on the old JCM 2000s, you can engage that deep switch, turn your bass down more, and you would retain a lot of that tightness on your low end, and with it still being a very full sound. Now, There's a bit more balance that you have to do with your resonance control and your bass control, and it does tend to come across flubby unless you're throwing a boost in front of it. The other thing here with the DSL 100 HR, I've always absolutely hated OD2. I've been more of an OD1 kind of guy, and the reason behind it is I find it comes across like it's sort of a fuzz pedal, or it can. So for me, if I'm playing on like the E string or like the low E string or whatever, and I am playing like just a single note on the 8th or the 10th fret, that should be just like a hit. You know what I mean? Like it should be a hit. Instead, it comes across as if it's a fall. You know what I mean? So you're hearing like instead of bang. We as guitar players sometimes, you know, explain things very differently. But that it's just something that I've always found that it's come across as a fuzz pedal. OD1 is a lot more usable for me. Even though you do have to dial in your gain a little more than you typically would, because it's supposed to be like sort of vintage voice, just above that crunch level. But I've always found that you get a little more clarity when it comes to OD1, even if you are pushing the gain to like almost 2 o'clock. I did not whatsoever engage the tone shift. The tone shift, you really have to dial in certain settings. You have to be going for a certain sound for that tone shift to be engaged. And it's something that, like, some people don't know about it. There are certain people that they have the same settings at all times on their amp. And what they'll do is they'll engage the tone shift. They'll listen to it with the tone shift and not change the EQ settings, and they'll just be like, can't use the tone switch, is absolutely horrible. Tone shift, very bad. And then if for some reason they watch you in a YouTube video using the tone shift, like, how dare you? That just sucks your tone right out. So the tone shift it was always on the JCM 2000s as well. It's something that if you're going to be using the tone shift, you're guaranteed to be skewing some of your EQ to places you wouldn't normally do that to get a desired tone, okay? And also, just like anything, you need to have a healthy amount of volume when it comes to tube amps for them to react appropriately. So I've always been someone who plays at a very high volume because I have a separate treated room for my cabinets. But yeah, it's something that if you're engaging the tone shift and you're going to be skewing your EQ and playing at high volumes, you'll get an all right tone depending on what you're going for. Last thing that I want to say here is if for some reason you like my EQ settings and you want to copy them, because I never used to give them, now I'm trying to give them here. My hope is when you look at the EQ settings, you don't do what a typical person does, and you don't just look at resonance, presence, bass, middle, treble, and gain. Volume is like the master volume and the channel volume, most important part to a tube amp. If you're playing at lower volumes, so if you're bringing that master volume way, way back so you can play it with the cabinet in front of you or, you know, with other people in the house, then you're playing at what's called bedroom levels. If you're playing at bedroom levels, you need to skew your presence, your bass, your treble, and your gain way over to the right to get a somewhat all right sound. And then you're using that middle frequency to actually tune it to whatever you're trying to get. Versus what a lot of other people do, and a lot of people don't know this, is they'll start out with the master volume. Like I'm using master 1, not master 2. So if you go back and look at my settings, look at how loud that is. And then the channel volume, look at the channel volume. A lot of people will start with master and channel, and then they'll keep everything in the middle, and that's when they'll start, like, you know, taking away and bringing a little back in to get a sound. If you're not starting out with volume, then it's you're going to be starting out with certain things skewed, and it's going to take you a lot longer to get a desired sound. So if you're going to copy my settings for whatever reason you might want to, start with volume. Thanks for watching.